5. Scar's shoes echoed across the steel as she walked across the floor, a bag heavy full of metal beads settling into her pocket. Behind her, a creature with translucent skin and bright red bones trembled. "Ruin take you, monster!" he cried before losing his strength and falling down into the pit below. All across the front of the room, other figures huddled, frightened, none willing to help their friend. Scar strode through the front doors. The guards were gone. They'd run with the rest of the colony the moment they'd seen Scar enter their home. She walked past homes, hearing the creatures inside huddling in fear, afraid of what Scar was. She kept up the act. She hated having to be this person, but with all the people that she could protect with the magic, she needed it, even if it caused fear to these few. She stepped out of their cavern into the open sky above, where ash fell lightly, tingling in her hair as she walked. She could have traveled from anywhere within the cavern or outside, but she needed a breath before she went back to the world of darkness. She had to help G. With firm resolve, she took out the blade that connected Earth and this world. She'd shaved it down a bit to make it less sharp after being cut a few times, which worked all right. Once a material portal was connected to worlds, they were pretty sturdy. They could hold up to chipping and things. She went back to Earth, which was completely dark, especially in this valley. She could see light in the sky from city lights further off, but here it was peaceful and dark. Still with her hand in the pocket, she released the blade and led it back to its place and summoned the crystal that Darren had given her to connect her to the world of darkness. She went through there and went to go meet with Darren. She got to the shipyard and found that Ceridian and he were waiting in front of a sleek-looking craft, much nicer than the flying saucer that she and G had taken earlier in the week. She heard the two deliberating about something and asked if we were going to get going. I thought we were on a deadline. And Darren said that they had to get permission to get different crafts from a number of different places. And thankfully they had gotten permissions easily enough. They were able to cut corners, even as humans, with the current situation. And the pilot would be here soon, and they'd be to G within a matter of minutes. Soon enough, the pilot appeared, and none of the Prophithians had hair, but Scar could tell this Prophithian had kind of feminine features, more so than in others that she'd seen, more so than in Ceridian that was with them. But the pilot put her hand on the craft, the back of which unfolded like a hand, and they climbed inside. The pilot and Ceridian went up front, which left Scar and Darren to austere benches in the back. They went in, and Scar sat down on the bench, holding onto the railing next to her, or onto the bar next to her, as the pilot got ready and took off into the air. Darren sat, eyes unfocused, as he lightly rubbed the green crystal on the edge of his seat. "What you think about?" Scar asked. Darren came out of his thoughts and said, "Oh, just taking a prayer." And she said, "For what? Do you really believe in religion?" I said, "Yeah, I've been praying as long as I've been here. It's absolutely something that I do." And she said, "I feel like traveling would kind of take away your ability to believe in anything. I mean, with everything that you've seen, I don't see how you can be religious. And Darren said, I can respect that viewpoint, but I don't know. With all the things that I've seen, it's honestly just strengthened my belief in religion. Who's to say that it's not true? Scar said, I mean, the fact that they all say that they're true, that can't all be the case, especially when so many of them say that they're the only true religion. Darren shrugged his shoulders. Said, I can see that, but the different worlds are connected in different ways. They each have different rules, and I don't see why they can't each have their own real religions. I mean, isn't there a world out there where each religion is real? Is that where they come from? Scar wasn't sure. She hadn't thought too much about this. Grant had never brought it up, and he was the only real traveler that Scar knew, so she hadn't thought too much about it. Besides, she'd never been too spiritual before traveling anyway. But to hear Darren so confident about it was strange for her. And he continued, besides, religion's kind of important for my job. I'm here to protect the seer, which is the leader of the Sirenites, and he has as much political and a political authority as he does theological, and I don't see why it can't be true. Besides, it's never hurt me to pray. I feel like G needs all the help that we can get him. He was cut off as the pilot shouted something that Scar just couldn't understand. She looked to Darren, and he said the pilot doesn't want to go below the mountaintop. She's spooked by G, and honestly, I don't blame her. Do you want us to lower you down? Scar said, no, I'm fine. Just open the back, and I'll get out. She reached into her pockets and swallowed a few of the metal beads that she'd recently acquired, swallowed them down with Dr. Pepper, and returned it all back to her pockets. As she turned toward the exit, Darren caught her arm. He said, remember, don't threaten yourself for G. If there's any trouble, get out of there. Do the best that you can. See if you can't slow him down, stop him, and let us know the moment that you do. We'll come in and get the rest taken care of. We'll sedate him and make sure that he's good to go. Scar nodded, took a breath, and nodded to the pilot, who opened up the back. Scar threw herself at the back of the craft and plummeted toward the earth. Azure sky above and pure white cliffs below. She was barely able to make out the remains of the dead fire where they'd seen Reggie, or where they'd seen G and Scar. G and Blaze. Whew! Sorry. Where they'd seen G and Blaze. She angled herself that direction. She plummeted toward the earth, fighting winds that felt exhilarating. It was moments like this that she loved traveling, even if it meant doing what she was going to do next. As she approached, she pulled coins out of her pocket and shot them forward toward the ground. Gave herself 3 to give herself a good anchor. They slammed into the ground ahead of her, and she continued to push. They didn't move any farther, but they slowed her down as she neared the ground. She didn't dare try to shoot any of her darts from here, because they would be completely lost in the wind, but coins worked. She was still traveling pretty fast when she slammed down into the ground, throwing white dust all around her. She immediately pulled up her gun and shot where G had been standing, where G had been sitting, where she saw him above, and threw herself out of the dust cloud. G was nowhere to be seen, and she spun around to see him behind her as he started coming out, her wire sword drawn. She fired a couple more shots, and each one missed terribly. She was able... they all just missed wildly. He knew exactly where they were going to hit. She said, all right. And she thought, all right, time to even the playing field. She immediately began to burn the metals within her, which threw shadows out of everything. She could see the dust cloud diminishing, and she could see Blaze where he was going, and she could see G, but she saw 3 shadows sprout from him, which was unlike anything that she'd ever seen before. She wasn't sure what to do or which shadow he'd follow, and each of those shadows took off 3 shadows, or spread into 3 shadows, which continued. And it was hard to see, but she still tried her best to try to shoot more darts at him. And she dove out of the way in time to evade a wall of fire that Blaze shot up from behind her. And she turned, thinking, I'm trying to stop him. I need your help. I'm not here to hurt G. But she focused just on attacking G and tried to shoot each of the 3 shadows. He took one of the future paths, but the dart curved out of the way and just completely missed, and she realized he had the force. She thought, great, how am I supposed to do this? At that moment, an electric, like a clap of thunder sounded, and Scar felt a searing pain that threw her back, and she'd been scorched by lightning or something. And she looked at G, and he had a similar, he had a scar across his face from being hit by something. He'd been burned. So G hadn't done that, but what had? She pulled herself back up and tried to dance around him. He came running at her, and she threw herself into the air above and tried to shoot him as she came down, but he evaded and managed to brush her with a finger as she passed. And the moment he touched her, shadows poured out of him. Infinite shadows. She could barely make out anything and realized any advantage she'd had was completely gone, and there was nothing that she could do. And extinguishing that to stop from blinding herself, she shot up into the air and just moved to get away. She heard Darren's voice saying, "What's going on? We can't see anything through the dust." And she said, It's compromised. It's done. G's got the better of me, and I can't get ahead of him. I need to get out." And Darren said, "I understand. Come back to the craft." She shot her way up and pulled herself into the craft, pulled against the metal of the ship. And Darren reached out and took her hand and pulled her into the craft, just as it lurched downward. And the pilot shouted something that she couldn't make out. As they looked out the back, the dust was clearing, and they could see G from below, arms extended out to the craft, as it lurched again and came down closer to G and closer to the side of the cliffs. And she tried to stabilize herself. She didn't know what she could do, and watched helplessly as Ceridian lifted the silvery staff that he kept, set it on his shoulder, and she saw a flash of light that blinded her as the ship lurched forward, and she realized that Ceridian had done something and hit G. The ship lurched away and smashed straight into the canyon side and pulled away, but one of the engines had been damaged, and it drifted back again and slammed into the side and carved its way down the canyon until it landed on a ledge a little bit away. They'd all been thrown to the ground, and Scar lost consciousness. End of chapter 5.